Okay, we're going towards the Parsha. Ho Elokim Nisa et Avraham. First point I just want to make has to do with the verb. What I call variations of the verb. How would you translate this? Ho Elokim Nisa et Avraham. How you translate this? How has it been? Never mind.
Yeah.
How,
Test.
it means
Test.
what
God
test?
tests Abraham.
What's the subject of the sentence?
Ha Elokim.
Yeah.
God tests Abraham.
Okay, so the usual translation of Elohim
Tested.
is God. Now I'm going to show you in 2 minutes that the text does not talk about God. I may have made the point many times here, the same thing. It talks Elohim and Hashem. And Chazal gave enough information to tell you, for once and for all, eliminate the God talk and do what we say. Say Ha Elokim and say Hashem. That's what the Gemara says. That Hashem relates to the Eitzad Chaim, and Elokim refers to the Eitz Hadas Torah. In the text, as you know, the Nachash says, you'll eat from this tree, you'll be like Elokim Yodei Torah. Okay. So the first point to see is that we have to eliminate the translation of God. Put this word in itself, Elokim, put Hashem. What does that give you? One thing it gives you is that there may be other translations of the two words other than God. For example, for me, these are strictly human characteristics of life and of call it conscience, whatever, however you're going to develop the detail. But the basic point is, it allows for alternatives, if they can be worked out, and it allows for what David always brings in, namely, that to make it either or, like I did in the book, is to restrict it much too much. So in effect, what we're saying is, we could leave it open. Let the reader plug in whatever resonates with him, including somebody like myself, where it's no God in the picture at all. God meaning omniscient, all-powerful, the God meaning not what's in the text. There's no God in the text. But there's God in medieval Jewish philosophy. So what we're reading is not the text in its own terms, which has a wider frame here. We're reading the Rambam Yudah Levi version of the text, the overlay that was put on. Okay, we'll come back a little later. Now what's the point? We have a verb. Ha Elokim, we'll get to the hey right away in 2 minutes. Ha Elokim is not Elokim. In 50, 60 places in the Chumash it says Ha Elokim, okay, not Elokim. It's translated Elokim, however they translate it, but it's Ha Elokim, that's Hey HaYediyah, and we have to understand what that is referring to. Okay, but the basic point, we'll come back to that for the moment. But what's the basic point? The basic point is, we have a verb. How do you say had been tested? How do you say has been tested? There ain't no word in Hebrew. There ain't no word in Hebrew for that. But the idea is there. And the reader has to judge from the context which of the three to choose. Was, had been, has been. What do you mean has been? What does that mean? Well, had been. What does it mean? What does that
Any
mean?
time in the past, unspecified. In English.
No.
Has been.
Mm-hmm.
Any time in the past,
Oh, wait,
unspecified.
but you,
And the
you're
result
having has been
now
or had
matters.
been?
Has been.
We have was, okay?
A specific time in the past.
Okay. I say it's not necessarily a specific time, but it is. But the key is that when we say has been, we are bringing the action into the present. That's what we're doing. We're saying has been, okay, it happened at a time, blah, 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 blah. And from the context, we judge it's still going on, it still hasn't left an impact, whatever you want to say.
The impact is now.
But had been means, it happened at the time, and it doesn't have the temporalization, that's what I call it. What we're doing by a simple transformation of the verb is temporalizing what we're reading. We're reading about. So we're not saying to the student, oh, for the moment use God. I mean, it makes no difference. We're not saying to the student something that's, quote, in the past, finished, complete, no relevance. What we're saying is we're building into a grammatical simple thing of varying the verb. We're bringing it into the contemporary picture. Because in pedagogy, we could now talk about it when we translate it had been. Instead of has been, the teacher, we're talking of it, or whatever the teacher will raise questions in the pedagogy and bring the student right into the contemporary picture. In every single piece on healing, when I was working on the intimacy problem and so on, to bypass the past and the future and to focus on the now is the fundamental point in all healing. You look at any article you want and you'll see that's what they're concerned about. And I say that's in Kohelet. That the whole story is that you have to have an alternative way of looking at things other than linear time. So in effect, what we're doing is we're differentiating between the now, not the present, the now as indicated by this grammar. Now, every verb, that's what I said, if I got another 120, I'd make a new translation. Every single verb in the text is amenable to judgment by the reader as to which of the three fit the context. Okay? Beautiful. Bereshit bara Elokim et hashamayim et haaretz. First verb in the text. What do you want to say? What's your translation? Was, has been, had been. Okay, you look at the story, what do you see? It doesn't continue to today. Has been doesn't fit the text. Why? Because in my Peshat, we're talking about the meltdown, the last meltdown, and a special set of conditions that were one-time conditions. Those conditions don't exist today. The earth isn't covered by water. So in my Peshat, if you don't take that Peshat, you may find you have another one. But in my Peshat, it says, had been. Had been. In other words, when we talk about the Bria, in this context of the Psukim and so on, we have to realize that we're talking something that's gone and isn't repeated. And then the pedagogy will be the discussion and how we get across this to the student. So here was a different type of, another example of the verb, but it's the same thing. So it's variation of the verb. A little thing like that. It's unbelievable. Okay, another point, and then we can start for a little discussion here, or finish up. I mentioned that, I'm big on the performative. You can get crazy already, hearing it so many times. But another thing that I want us to do in order to understand the text is to examine every place in the text where it uses or refers to speaking or writing. Okay? And determine from the context whether we should translate it, he said, as Amar has been translated for 2,000 years. Okay? Amar has been translated for 2,000 years. He said, right? He said. And then the Alavei came along here. The Alavei came along here. And in his translation, I didn't do it. He did it in his own translation. In his translation, he says, God declared. God declared. I didn't do it. Declare is a performative. To declare is to say, I declare. Prayer is a performative. And you can go for yourself to work out the different performances. So what are we saying? The basic language, I go further. The basic language of the Chumash is not assertion. It's performatives. And assertions are true or false. And performatives are efficacious or not efficacious. They do work or they don't do work. Now, they have big role to play in science and something, because to posit an axiom set is a performative. I'm not doing any of that tonight, but to understand what we're talking about, we're not just talking about simple, linguistic points. I mean, when you work out what's it all about, there is no mathematics without a performative. And what is the value? A performative does not need justification. You don't justify an axiom set, you work with it. And you get proofs. And you do things with it. So that the function of the performative, of positing, that's intrinsic to science. Among other things, the legal dimension and the rest of the stuff. But the basic point is that the language, we can't even imagine what it would be to live in a society where the basic language is the performative. I said in passing a number of times, we talk a lot. We're a talking society. Okay? But we're in the back of truth. What did I do? I spent a lifetime on the God issue. I went into philosophy for the God issue. And it took 40 years, 50 years, to realize that I asked the wrong question. Because I took it as an assertion. There ain't nothing in the literature that can support it. There are no proofs. There is medieval philosophy. Medieval philosophy, to me, is a way of organizing the world in a metaphysics, and organizing the world from the point of view of rationality, of reason. So what's the point? The backdrop, the societal backdrop, is God. Medieval philosophy, medieval world. So what's the point? To me, the metaphysics is to show that by understanding a whole package, how mathematics looks and how motion and this and all kinds of topics, beautiful topics, cognition and the nature of logic and so on and so on. Beautiful topics in medieval philosophy. But the point of it all is to show that there's one exception. God is an exception in every single Jewish, Islamic, and Christian philosophy. Metaphysics. The metaphysics is there, to me, to give a chizuk to what that was the life. The life was God-centered life. So the metaphysics was to show you that it's so rich in relation to the universe in all of its facets, but when it comes to God, there's equivocation. We'd like it to be, but we don't quite have it worked out. When we work out the nature of motion in Aristotle, we have a different analysis than to work out the first mover. In other words, I make it boldly stated, it's the exception that's the important thing. For that world, When Descartes came and Newton, it's all over. Like I told you many times when I came to Reb Chaim Olam Shalom, and he said to me, Torah is good. Rambam, he said, not Torah. Rambam is good until Descartes. He said Descartes. Okay, I say scientific revolution. Newton. Okay. So, I never heard such a thing. From Brisk, how could you learn a blood Gemara without a Rambam? I mean, okay, but he wasn't talking about that. He's saying the Rambam orientation to the world is good until Descartes, until the contemporary period. And what did Descartes try to do? And we still got struggling on it. If I taught 17th century philosophy, I never dreamed that I would be able to teach Descartes the way I would teach it today. After reading Heidegger and the history of metaphysics and showing how Descartes, I think, therefore I am, is not a statement. It's not an assertion. It's a posit. It's a forming. He wanted to posit the Newtonian mathematical way of thinking. That's way off for tonight. There's nothing to do with anything like that. But I'm just showing you what we're talking about. When I say performative, it has tremendous ramifications and implications. So, well, from the point of view of Chumash, we have to take every place where it says Amar, Daber, Kara, or any word that Katav, any word that relates to writing or speaking. I'll ask the question, is it a performative or is it an assertion? Because what makes it so tricky is that performatives get dressed up grammatically in assertion language. And so it looks like, from the grammar, that it's an assertion, amenable to truth or falsity. But conceptually, it's a performative. Performatives are neither true nor false. They have big function. And here, it opens the door to what the reader brings to the text. It's a dialogic text. I've had that point I made in this book. It's a dialogic text. It's you, as the reader, are part of the content of the material. So what are we doing? What we're saying is, well, here's some methodology to determine, does this fit the story better or worse? And so, Einochinami, the Alaveh, his translation, declared. Amar means, in the context, declared. A declaration is a performative and not true or false. So I asked the wrong question. So like Rav Chaim said, you got a great education, but you don't know a damn thing about Torah. Included in what he said that, he meant this. Part of it, not the whole story. He was talking, I said, I did Timing on Mitzvot. Well, for a brisk, you're going to say, Timing on Mitzvot? What happened to the whole guts, the conceptual guts, the beauty of the halakha? Like Rabbi Baruch Ber says, we don't deal with chickens, tables, and things. We deal with chalos. We deal with legal statuses and their implications and conditions. That's what it's all about. So when you think we're talking about donkeys and chairs and tables, we're talking about statuses, legal statuses. And then there's a whole thing that develops that way. Okay, so the basic point of this was that there's a whole methodology for the reader to enter every one of those words, kara, and in the book, in this new piece on the 6 days that I'm finishing up now, I say, okay, let's look at the 6 days and see what the text says. So it says, Vayomer, there's no Vaidaber, there's Vayomer, and it says Vayikra, he called. These words require analysis from the point of view of the performative versus the assertion. Okay, it's very big and it's exciting. It blows the mind. Well, for me, after 50 years of not understanding Torah, to understand one little snippet shows the fantastic beauty of the whole story. Okay, one more point and we go over for discussion. There's in the text, there's the word Mayim and Mayim Chayim. So David and myself, others, we were worrying about what does that mean? What's the difference? So, because Chaim is a principle, a fundamental principle of the Torah system in the text, okay? Eitz HaChaim, something, because of that. So, David and I, we try to understand the difference between Mayim and Mayim Chaim in terms of a big picture, that somehow this context where it was used was intimating or pointing out or working with the principle, the big picture. When you dig in more carefully, you see that even on the Google business, I'm watching that, there's a Discovery Channel, Channel 44, about guys who are delivering bees to Alaska. It's very interesting. And they talk about water. They talk about water that it looks fresh water, but it has microorganisms and things like this. You'd never tell the difference. And if you had it, if you drank it, you would die. And they had that on the program, so they had with them as explorers, having to make the delivery to Alaska. It was very interesting. They were delivering, the bees needed a special tree to relate to in terms of the development of the honey, and it probably had a special taste. And so they're showing you the pictures of how these truckers, it's about cars and engines, how these truckers went through the snow and no railroad, and I mean, all staggering, delivering 2 million bees, and showing you that because of a couple of boo-boos, when they opened it up, 50,000 were dead. But the basic point I want to make about the water, it looks 100% fresh, clean water, but it's known that in the Midbar, Midbar doesn't mean desert. Midbar includes, foliage and things like this, but it's like a forest, like a rainforest.
Wilderness.
Wilderness, much better word. Okay, in any event, so what do we see? By entering the text, and I labeled it minimization of metaphors. Metaphor presupposes assertion. Then, after you have the concept of assertion, what you're asserting, you can now expand it into the beautiful stuff that we've done with metaphor, not only in literature, but all over the place. Western civilization is the working out of the richness of metaphor. Okay, but you wouldn't do that. In this case, you won't jump right away to the metaphor. You would look, before you do anything in getting the shot of what the pasuk, what the frame means, you come in on the assumption everything that's done in that society is done from the point of view of practical, operational definitions. A thing is what it does, what it accomplishes, and so forth. So that the reader, don't jump right off the bat. The rule is minimize the metaphor before you conclude that it's a metaphor, because in certain places there may be a metaphor. I'm not, especially when you get out of the Chumash into the Navi, beautiful. I mean, in literature, beautiful pieces. But instead of jumping fast, and it's a metaphor, like we would do with Chaim. Well, yeah, if you don't have the information of what they had, there were new things, there were things, then you don't have it. You don't have the answer. I mentioned before, some of the research has shown that one part of Mount Sinai had psychedelic mushroom. Whether it's true or not is not the point here. The point I'm trying to show is that if somebody come up with that, and it's in the literature, and it's part of people who worked in this, geology and this and whatever it is, it can't be thrown out automatically. Maybe Moshe got special energy effect from relating to the psychedelic. In other words, why are we going narrow when we have the methodology to go wide? Fine. Somebody says, and we put it in mix it with the verb, and somebody says, oh, that's nonsense. There's a lot of shtuyot, as you know, in the Google. I mean, it's not the last word in understanding everything. But it's there for the taking. So instead of throwing it out automatically, oh no, Moshe Rabbeinu had Kodesh Baruch, Nevuah and this and that and this and that, and putting in right away, putting in the grooves in the mind, which is a theological overview. Okay, Rabbi used to say, we hear something, right away put it into our baggage pile, and we filter it through the grooves, and that's it. No, let's open it up and include what the usual translation. But we have another dimension that opens it up to a whole other set of ballgame, a picture. And you can go down the line, shofar. In the healing literature, they talk about the sound affecting the shape of the horn, affecting the sound and affecting healing. You can go and do what you want. You can spend your whole time figuring all these things. All I was saying is it opens up a channel that, to me, is fundamentally required, because even though it's not science in the highest sense of the term, much more empirical or descriptive, whatever you want to say, but it's not metaphysical. Metaphysics will put us under. And you can know for yourself, one of the basic reasons why educated people in Torah, out of Torah, are throwing out the rest of the system is because, who's this God? What are we talking about? I want to listen to myself. I don't want to get somebody telling me what to do. But God knows everything. God, and you can fill in for yourself the scenario. Well, a lot of people just balk right off the bat. They don't even give it a chance to get off the ground. They don't even see the beauty of the whole system. And part of it is coming from this whole thing. We wouldn't be here today if we didn't have medieval Jewish philosophy. They pulled us through from Yudah Levi to Rav Sadia Gaon, and so on. They pulled Rav Sadia Gaon and Yudah Levi and all. They pulled us through. But it's like Rav Chaim said, it's all finished. It's what we got to do. That's the work we've got to do. As I said, if I get another 120, I will start working on it tomorrow. Because that we have to undo the great accomplishment of Chazal. And I say, oh yes, Chazal knew everything that I just said, but they couldn't put it in the public. They couldn't say things. They had Christianity on their backs. They had Greek Hellenism on their back. Chazal couldn't say what I could say. Because we're in the Atchalta de Geula. We're in a different period in terms of Jewish history and Jewish life. And we need, like Chazal say, every generation requires reconceptualization of the principles. And this reconceptualization for us is, in the backdrop, in the last analysis, significantly related to the scientific dimension. To end on one little point, when I did the auric literature, auras, okay, so I analyzed 30, 40 pages, not my own, and I got it from the material, okay, Barbara Brennan, a world-renowned healer, and I read her books, and I saw where she's going. She was a physicist for NASA in her early years, and then she got into healing, and then in her book she gives the description of the healing. Well, when you read some of the stuff in string theory is the one topic. It may be Eisgespiel, but one topic today is string theory. In terms of, we're talking the theory of everything, to solve we're dealing with physics, with theoretical physics. Some of the things that are written in the simple descriptive language for the layman in some of the articles about string theory resonate with descriptions that she gives of auras. Two-dimensional shape. Auras. It's like a line.
Lights around the body.
All of these things, a big thing is not on three-dimensional. They all talk about line shape, outline shape, like for it. And indeed, as you all know, I've been on this kick, and it all started with Basar Echad, one shape. The Alavei discovered the word means shape, not flesh. 50 times in the New Testament it was flesh. So when St. Jerome translated it, the text, he didn't know what it meant, but he saw the big opening, because sexuality, as you know, has been on a taboo, especially in Christianity. So when St. Jerome translated the Bible into the Latin, it turned out that he's dealing with flesh, which is the other meaning of the word. When the Kohen is examining the meat, it means flesh. But it also carries the meaning of Basar Echad. And so I gave the example of shadows. When you walk behind somebody, or you're holding hands, or you walk behind and the shadow, what happens? It has no thickness. It's what we call two-dimensional. Okay? So when you start and you work out through the whole thing, I was telling Zach before, geomancy is the name given to putting your finger in the sand and drawing a line. And out of that would come what's going to happen and blah, 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 blah. The aberrations that are built in cover the trees of the forest. In other words, there may be some beautiful things in a simple thing like drawing a line on the sand. And I linked it up with Pythagoras, and I linked it up with what's the movement if you don't lift your hand. If you lift your hand, you can get 2 points. You can get 2 ends to the string. If you don't lift your hand, you can't get a square. You can't get a right angle. Examine it. Everything is a curve. You can talk about a limit. You can talk about that. So I related geomancy to the notion of shape. And shape did not mean body. I even proposed as an experiment that suppose the society was of such character that there were 50,000 people in Moshe Rabbeinu's time that had, like I had, congenital blindness in one eye. So I don't see, except peripheral, I don't see depth. No depth perception. The brain compensates and deals with a field and so on, so I see depth. But I asked the optometry guy once, I said, what do you mean? I have nothing wrong with me. He says, clear the desk. And he says, give me that glass of water. And sure enough, I went over here. Because the brain compensated for the lack of vision, of scar tissue on the retina. So I said, well, let's assume there was a whole group like that who didn't perceive thickness. Well, the fact that we as people perceive thickness gives a chizuk to three-dimensionality of the primacy of body. But why are we so sure that for Moshe Rabbeinu and the Chumash text, body is prime? Body is part of geometry. Geometry is Greek. One could ask the question, is there geometry in the Chumash? Where is it? Anyway, what I want to do in this second part of the talk was, and forget about the thing for the time being, was to show you that we have here a number of things for method, that will help open up the text, bring it relevant to the contemporary period, and most important, get Peshat. If we want to say that it's an important piece. If we want to say, look, you're going to compare the Mishnah, you're going to compare Chazal with an ancient Near Eastern text like the Chumash, well, if you're in that boat, all right, then you say, look, you're wasting time. Go for Chazal because Chazal are so rich and so on. I mean, but if you we didn't throw it out. We still keep it. We still part of the liturgy and part of the thing. We still kept it. I say a min hashamayim bracha that we kept it, because now we can open it up in ways that we didn't do it heretofore. And that thing goes, like around the table, I told you about the Alavei. You can read it for yourself, it's online. That's where it's going to stay. Nobody's going to translate Basar Echad as one flesh, as one flesh meaning shape, as one shape. They're going to keep to the old translation, including Rav Soloveitchik and everybody else who wrote about intimacy, because it even changes your view of what's going on. This is, and look at the word, echad. Echad is a big word in Torah. That's not just a nothing. It's like a singularity. It has a specialness. And it was a big joke, because the other day, Meir was here, and he was showing me something in the Kabbalah. All of what I say is in the Kabbalah, incidentally. And when he showed, he says to me, oh, here's the place, Pitkei Chachma. We took my book off the shelf. He had his, but he took off mine. And he's saying, I said, so give me the page. And when I get a chance, I'll look it up. He gives me the page. He says, you underlined it in red. In the Ramchal, his pshat on Basar Echad was, in general, without some of the fineries that I put into it, exactly what I said. And he uses the Lashon. That's pshat. For him, in the Kabbalah systematics, what we'd call two-dimensional, or the shape outline for a child's coloring book. We center on like filling it in, right? Filling it in, but the child, I'll bet, part of the processing by the child is not filling it in as a, circumscribed space, but just the line. And when you put two people together, they have a different shape. So we always took it, well, look, if one person, the male and the female, are interconnected bodily, like an embrace, and so where you can't tell from the statue where the one ends and the other begins. So we took it as three-dimensional, as a metaphor. Until today, Rav wrote his book on intimacy, and here he's using the same translation, the old translation, which has a coloring, has a coloration that's not in Torah. We never had all of this negation of the body and all the rest that goes with it. We had a rich conception of male, female. And once you start with Basar Echad and you start working, then you start working through Rivka and Yaakov, all of a sudden, the vista changes. The music changes. The music, for me, I was working on intimacy. The music changes. You get different impression of the personages in the system. What I try to do is just to give a few examples and illustrate that there's work to be done to get Peshat Peshat in the text.